Jimmy Swaggart, the Reverend Jim Baker, the Reverend Walker Railey. Nationwide, he may not be a household word, but in Dallas, people can't stop talking about him. Tonight, in a major 2020 investigation, a two-part report, you'll see why. Unlike Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker, Walker Railey was a traditional Protestant minister. He was also a highly respected community leader and was head of one of the largest Methodist churches in the country. It's said that he was destined to become bishop.
But Reverend Railey's career has also been cut short, and both the Dallas police and the FBI are investigating why. It's a mystery that has left his congregation shell-shocked, and it's been front-page news in Dallas for months. Tom Jarrell looks at what caused Reverend Railey's fall from grace.
Amidst the towering neon of downtown Dallas, a voice from the pulpit was challenging the social condition.
Some of us begin to believe that every edifice in Dallas glitters. But within an eighth of a mile of this building and all of the glittering ones around it, there are shacks that are ready to fall down, and they are inhabited by people who can barely stand up. Some people don't even see a contrast in all of that, and that's the problem.
A charismatic minister had breathed new life into the old First United Methodist Church.
And that, my dear sisters and brothers in Christ, is why we have a church.
His name, Walker Railey.
Are the light of the world.
No one in the congregation doubted he was destined to become a Methodist bishop.
Walker Railey was the ultimate minister. Someone has said he did not preach a sermon, he preached a drama.
He preached in a way that grabbed your head and your heart and your gut.
I've decided to tell it all this morning.
At age 40, Railey was already head of one of the largest Methodist churches in the country.
All right, everybody stand by, roll tape.
His Sunday message was televised across the city.
Widen out as you go, Stu.
It was a perfect springboard for a crusading minister. Reverend Walker Railey had everything going for him. His wife, Peggy, was an ideal partner for an ambitious preacher. She had a master's degree in sacred music. But while Peggy was self-conscious in the public spotlight, her husband used it skillfully to focus on controversial issues.
The Ku Klux Klan was doing their old stuff yesterday outside of Cummings, Georgia.
On the eve of Martin Luther King's birthday, Reverend Railey was attacking racism.
There's more racial tension and polarization in Dallas, Texas.
Railey's outspoken views from the pulpit often made him the target of passing criticism, protest calls, and hate mail. But after this sermon, for the first time, hate mail arrived from someone threatening revenge. John Yarrington, the choir director, and his wife Diane remembered the impact of the letters on their closest friends.
Walker was very worried about what might happen to the children, particularly after their names were mentioned in one of the letters.
Right. Something like, you have such lovely children, it would be terrible if something happened to them.
Beautiful wife, beautiful home, beautiful children, but not for long.
The threats against Reverend Railey and his family increased in intensity. The Dallas police and the FBI were called in. The most threatening letter was hand-delivered.
On Easter Sunday, a note was slipped under one of the office doors here between the two services. And the note said something like, today Christ arose, but today you go down.
This is Easter Sunday.
But despite the threat on his life, Walker Railey was determined to preach his Easter sermon. Its foreboding theme was punctuated with references to death.
The time will come when you will die. And the time will come when you will die. And the time will come when I will die.
Very high tension in the church.
Everybody is going to die.
He had borrowed a bulletproof vest. He had the plainclothes policeman at his side.
The Easter service ended without the anticipated violence. However, no one, including Reverend Railey, could know this would be his last benediction.
Amen.
On the Monday after Easter, Peggy Railey called the private security company that protected the Railey home. She wanted to make certain that her alarm system was working properly. In the event of a break-in, an alarm would sound, dispatching a private security officer to the home and alerting the entire neighborhood.
She was worried about the family and her safety, and the kids' safety, and the Reverend's. And she was very diligent about using her alarm system.
The following day, Tuesday, Peggy Railey and the children were safely inside a home that was a virtual fortress, protected by $5,000 worth of electronic devices. Reverend Railey left after dinner that night, April 21st, and told his wife he'd be at the SMU library until after midnight. Sometime that night, it happened. A baffling crime that would horrify the city. It was well after midnight when Reverend Railey drove down the back alley that led to his home and turned into his driveway. When he opened the garage door, Peggy, his wife of 16 years, lay strangled inside.
Alice, emergency, please. This is Walker Railey. I'm at 9328 Trail Hill Drive. What's the problem, sir? I've just come into the house and my wife is in the garage. Somebody's done something to her. Send the paramedics and send the please. Okay, stay on the line with me. Has she been beat up or what? I don't know. She's just laying on the floor of the garage. I just got here. She's foaming at the mouth or something. Okay, we'll get him out there. Please hurry.
The next call went to the Arringtons.
He said, Diane, it's Walker. Come quick. Something awful has happened to Peggy. He had been crying. He cried again when we got there. He was just panic-stricken by the whole thing.
Peggy arrived at the hospital, unconscious and gasping for breath. The attack had been so sudden, so unexpected, that her shirt tail was still neatly tucked in. The marks on her neck showed she had been strangled from behind, a thin cord wrapped around several times, and then pulled tight.
I'd never seen anybody strangled. It's, I can't forget it.
Dallas was jolted awake with news of the attack. Stunned church members console one another at prayer services. Their biggest fear? Where would the madman who had done this strike next?
We didn't know what this guy was going to continue to do and what he might do to the congregation. People were afraid for their children to be in the nursery. We were just sick. We were just scared not only for what was going to happen to Peggy, but what was going to happen to the children.
There was tremendous confusion among the congregation, but I think it was assumed that whoever was writing the letters had also committed the deed.
Detectives combed the garage in search of evidence, but came up empty-handed. The attacker had left no fingerprints, no weapon. Police believe Peggy Railey was strangled sometime between 9:30 and 11:30 p.m. There was no sign of a struggle and no forced entry. As for the security system, Railey told police the system had been turned off before he arrived home. Either Peggy Railey knew her attacker and opened the door, or her attacker knew how to disarm the complicated alarm system. But a system like the Rayleys has 6,151 possible code combinations. Security Officer Jerry Lacey says it would be virtually impossible for a stranger to disarm it.
Guess at it. The minute you hit the wrong number, the keypad shuts down.
So there's no question, whoever turned the system off knew how to operate it.
The chance of someone getting in their home and turning it off without knowing the codes, very slim.
Do you think she would have gone into the garage alone at 10 o'clock at night?
No, I don't.
And turned off the system?
No.
No.
Neither one of us think that. That's completely out of character with anything we know about her. It makes no sense at all that she would have done that.
Would she have let anyone in the house that late that she didn't know?
No.
No.
What happened that night was trapped inside Peggy Railey, who remained in an irreversible coma, brain dead.
Every 5 hours to go down and see your wife in a coma is not an uplifting experience. And to go see your children and have your son ask, when's mommy coming home, is not an easy question. And
sympathy for the grief-stricken minister grew. Billy Graham and Jesse Jackson both sent condolences. As 6,000 letters of support poured into the hospital, the case took an entirely unexpected turn. Reverend Railey attempted suicide. He was found unconscious from an overdose of tranquilizers. Police found a curious 5-page suicide note. Until today, its contents have never been made public. In it, Railey wrote, "There is a demon inside my soul. At times that demon has lured me into doing things I did not want to do. I am the baddest of the bad. I am the lowest of the low. The note raised the obvious question. Was this a deathbed confession? Had Railey's demons driven him to strangle his own wife? But when Railey regained consciousness, he denied it.
I was just writing a journal, but I was becoming increasingly aware of how low and depressed I was. And I got to the last paragraph, and within minutes I'd taken those pills.
But police soon provided another explanation. There were serious inconsistencies in what Railey had told them about where he had been on the night Peggy was attacked. To the disbelief of the congregation, Reverend Walker Railey was publicly identified as the #1 suspect.
People started thinking, well, maybe this is one of those other Jim and Tammy Faye Baker situations. It's just another minister who's fallen off the wagon. I couldn't believe how quickly that all occurred.
I was just outraged. That was the easy way out, and the police took it.
Church members retained an attorney who angrily accused the police of railroading his client. Reverend Railey would no longer cooperate with the investigation. The high-profile minister checked himself into an exclusive psychiatric hospital, out of sight and out of reach of the authorities. The tactic of stonewalling had begun.
Well, did the Reverend have something to hide? When we come back, tracing Walker Railey's movements on the night of the attack, and a tape recording released just today that raises more questions. The conclusion of Tom Jarrell's report, Fall from Grace.
A prominent Dallas minister, his wife brain dead after being strangled. Police unable to crack the case. Reverend Railey attempting suicide. Now, just a day after the crime, Railey had given a statement to police. Now they wanted to question him. Instead, he chose to speak through the media. Last spring, before new evidence was uncovered, Walker Railey sat for an interview with ABC affiliate WFAA in Dallas. Tom Jarrell picks up the story.
Reverend Walker Railey is refusing to answer
Authorities today confirmed the letters...
As the investigation of the attack on Peggy Railey intensified, every new development seemed to implicate Reverend Railey.
The pastor has refused to talk with police.
By now, the FBI had determined that the threatening letters Railey had received had come out of an electric typewriter from an office right here at First United Methodist Church. The speculation surrounding Railey grew.
I didn't attack my wife. I didn't plan to have somebody attack my wife. I didn't orchestrate the plan to attack my wife, and I didn't write the letters. And as I said to someone else who asked me, having said I didn't write the letters, had I written the letters, I wouldn't have written them on a typewriter in my own church. That's not even smart.
As details of the Railey case were reported day after day, the Dallas Police Department came under fire for their failure to bring Reverend Railey in for questioning. But Railey was within his legal rights not to talk.
I'm going to tell Walker Railey, if you're watching, I am tired of you messing with the Dallas Police Department.
With the police handcuffed by Railey's refusal to talk, police joined forces with prosecutor Norm Kinney, who angrily announced a new tactic. He would force Railey to appear before a grand jury.
I'm tired of this man messing with this investigation. He says he's concerned about this assault on his wife, but won't cooperate, won't talk to the police department. So now he can come down and explain it to a grand jury.
On July 29th, Walker Railey was forced by subpoena to appear before the Dallas County grand jury. The district attorney's office was waiting with scores of questions.
I've got no comment on this.
But before Railey could testify, defense attorney Doug Mulder announced a legal move that surprised everyone.
I've advised Walker, when he goes before the grand jury, to assert his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination and to say nothing. If he follows my advice, that's what he'll do.
It makes you look guilty. It makes him look like he's guilty by pleading the Fifth.
Well,
let's talk about
no,
that.
I understand that, and that's just a cross that he's going to have to bear. Did you take your lawyer's advice?
Reverend Railey took the Fifth Amendment 43 times, refusing to answer anything more than his name.
I think it's extremely unusual for a person to say, I refuse to answer a question on the grounds that may tend to incriminate me if the answer won't incriminate him.
But one person who was subpoenaed did testify, Lucy Papillon. A new name entered the picture and cast a whole new light on the case. A Dallas psychologist, Dr. Papillon revealed that she and Reverend Railey had had a secret love affair for over a year and had talked marriage. For a minister, the revelation of a mistress was scandal enough. But Lucy Papillon was also the daughter of a Methodist bishop. The Railey case was taking on the dimensions of a tragic soap opera.
What about Lucy Papillon? Were you with her that night?
The questions raised by Railey's silence were more than the church could tolerate. The revelation of his affair was the last straw. His official portrait as senior minister of the church was taken down. But Railey's fall from grace was the least of his problems. By now, the police were punching holes in his alibi, gathering evidence that contradicted his claim to have spent the entire evening in the library. The most incriminating evidence was generated by a mobile phone installed in Railey's car on the very day of the attack. It was the technology of this device, an ordinary mobile phone, that left a paper trail for the police to follow. Railey didn't know it, but every time he made a call, a computer was collecting data and keeping a written record, not only of the number he was dialing, but the precise time of day the call was placed. On the night of April 21st, Railey's account and the mobile phone records tell two different stories. One by one, police had traced the phone numbers Railey had called that night. With an itemized bill in hand, police were able to recreate some of Railey's movements on the night Peggy was attacked. When they traced this number, it led them for the first time to Railey's girlfriend. Lucy told police he was with her from approximately 7:40 until 8:45 p.m. Investigators had their first big break. At 8:53 p.m., there's no question where Railey was, and it wasn't the library. Police followed a computer-generated credit card receipt and traced it to this Texaco station. Another electronic device had contradicted Railey's story.
What does this receipt tell you?
This receipt tells me that this card was presented at 8:53 in the evening on April the 21st.
And the signature?
Looks to me like it's signed Walker L. Railey.
5 miles away at about the same time, Peggy Railey made a long-distance call to her mother. As of 9:15 p.m., Peggy was fine. No one but Railey knows where he spent the next 2 hours.
He did definitely go to both of the libraries at Southern Methodist University. But there's a hole from approximately 9 or 9:30 till about 11 p.m. that night when we haven't found anyone who puts him at the library.
Investigators believe Railey went to the library in order to carry out an elaborate scheme to account for the missing 2 hours. A scheme that began with an effort to make sure someone would remember him.
He approached a librarian and gave the librarian a business card that had some writing on the back of it, in his own handwriting. He said he had written 10:30 p.m. The librarian says that, yes, he got the card and he got it from Walker Railey, but that it wasn't given to him till after midnight.
Railey's alibi was falling apart. Another electronic device would unravel it altogether. Listen to the messages Railey recorded that night, made public today for the first time.
Hi, babe. I'm calling you from my mobile phone. Peg, it's about, I don't know, I don't have a watch. It's somewhere between 10:30, 10:45, somewhere along in there.
On the first message, he says, I don't wear a watch. Well, this is a man who everyone knows doesn't wear a watch. He's known not to wear a watch. I don't think this is a message that he needs to deliver to his wife.
I should be finished about 12:30 or so. I'll be in about 1. If you want to, go ahead and lock the garage door, and I'll park out front. It really doesn't matter to me at this point. My concern is that you're safe.
Kenny believes this message was intended not for Peggy, but for the police. That Railey had constructed his elaborate alibi around recorded messages. But Railey would be tripped up by the technology of the telephone company computer. While he was recording the time as 10:30 p.m., the computer across town was recording the actual time he made the call, 12:04 a.m.
If you're out, me, you, anyone else, we're out at night and we call home and it's 12:04. Your wife is at home and you say, hi, babe, it's 10:30 to 10:45 and I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. Now, assuming your wife is conscious and well at the time, when is she supposed to hear that?
I didn't go out that night to create an alibi. I didn't have any reason to create an alibi. I don't wear a watch. I don't carry a calendar for my own sanity. And so consequently, there are a lot of nights that I can't tell you second by second.
But when Railey made a second call at 12:29 a.m., he knew precisely what time it was.
Hi, babe. It's 12:29. I'm on the way home from SMU. Everything really went well. I got a lot accomplished. Had to leave my card with the reference librarian because there was one deal that I couldn't quite work out. I'm not calling on the private line because I know you're already asleep, but in case you get up with the kids, I just wanted you to know that I'm on the way home. It's 12:30. I'll be home by 12:45. Love you, dear. Bye-bye.
Now, either he's gotten a watch within the last 23, 24 minutes, or something, he's not telling us the truth about the first call. But at least he knows exactly to the minute what time it is when he calls at 12:29.
Mr. Prosecutor, did Reverend Railey try to kill his wife?
God and Reverend Railey know that, not me.
In September, Railey voluntarily turned in his Methodist credentials to preach, ending his 17-year career as a minister. He then sold the family home and moved to California with Lucy Papillon, leaving Peggy and his 2 children behind. 5-year-old Ryan and 2-year-old Megan now live with the Yarringtons, who have legal custody of the Railey children. Home movies show Railey back in Dallas for a holiday visit, watching his children celebrate Christmas with their new family.
Let Mommy help you open that one. I'll hold it for you. We'll hold your puppy here. Grandma will hold your puppy. Let Mommy help you open it. Thank you.
To even think that he was a suspect in it was so foreign to me that I just couldn't even deal with it. But that was 7 months ago. And since that time, we've learned a lot of things that we didn't know at that time. I cannot, no matter what else he has done, conceive of him doing that to her. Unless something just snapped.
There are a lot of people in Dallas who feel you have plenty of evidence to bring an indictment. Why haven't you prosecuted him?
I think without some sort of explanation, I could show that he was not where he says he was at the time he says he was there. He was not making phone calls at the time he says he was making phone calls. This does not necessarily make him a strangler. When it gets down to, Mr. Kinney, where is your evidence that he strangled his wife? I just don't have any.
I don't worry about an indictment because I didn't do anything. There are times that it feels like I'm the only one in the world thinks that. But I'm the one who knows.
We have a woman who weighs approximately 65 pounds who's laying in a nursing home, more dead than alive, a vegetable at the hands of whoever did this, being cared for now by her parents while Reverend Railey is flitted off to California. And don't forget about her.
The case has left you, as a prosecutor, a totally frustrated man.
That's right. But I'm patient.
For a year, he's been patient.
Tom, what happens now? This can't be the end of the story.
Barbara, it is an ongoing criminal investigation. They haven't closed the books on it at all. If it comes to trial anytime soon, it will likely be in a civil case. The family of Peggy Railey has filed this civil suit, and if they don't pull any punches at all. Let me quote. They say Walker Railey intentionally, knowingly, and brutally attempted to strangle his wife, Peggy Railey, to death. They want monetary damages to help pay for some of her medical costs.
But if they are able to have this civil suit and he comes to court, there is no prison if he's found guilty.
Not in the civil case. It would only be a monetary penalty. In the meanwhile, Walker Railey has dropped out of sight, and his attorney allegedly has told him to stay lost.
Well, it's one of the most fascinating cases that we've heard in a long time. Thank you, Tom.
Well, still ahead. Is this your baby? Last week, in Barbara's interview with Nancy Reagan, we saw how courageously the First Lady dealt with her breast cancer. And tonight, as promised, we look at the options every woman with breast cancer must choose from. They hear words like mastectomy, modified radical mastectomy, lumpectomy, chemotherapy, radiation therapy. There's a lot of confusion. But this year alone, an estimated 135,000 women will have to make a choice. The rate of breast cancer is up, and yet with very early detection and treatment, most women can survive. ABC News medical editor Dr. Timothy Johnson has our report.
1 out of every 10 women in this country eventually gets breast cancer. In January, 38-year-old Patricia Crow of Sharon, Massachusetts became one of the dreaded 1 in 10.
One evening I was changing my clothes, and my hand brushed by it, and I just kind of like felt it. It got me a little worried because I could actually really feel, a little lump.
Unfortunately, that little lump turned out to be cancer. Patricia's reaction was not unusual.
I think your initial thought is, well, the pathologist got somebody else's slide. It's not me. It's denial.
Actually, most breast cancer patients have little time for denial. They quickly have to face a major decision: how to best treat the cancerous tumor in the breast. 25 years ago, most women feared the treatment for breast cancer almost more than the disease. That's because the only treatment was a radical mastectomy, removing the entire breast and the underlying chest muscles. Because the radical mastectomy was very disfiguring, during the 1970s, most doctors changed to the modified radical, which still removed the entire breast, but left chest muscles intact. However, during more recent years, doctors have moved toward an even less disfiguring operation. Several studies have indicated that removing just the tumor, a so-called lumpectomy, would also work as long as follow-up radiation treatment was given to the breast after lumpectomy to kill any remaining cancer cells. A mastectomy does not require post-operative radiation since all the breast has been removed. Most of the support for lumpectomy plus radiation in this country comes from an ongoing study coordinated through this center in Pittsburgh and conducted at more than 100 institutions across the country. The first results of the study were published 3 years ago in the prestigious New England Journal of Medicine. At that time, the study was at the 5-year point in comparing survival results of mastectomy versus lumpectomy plus radiation. The study indicated that women who had had lumpectomies survived just as long as women who had had mastectomies. Now, 3 years later, the director of the Pittsburgh study says the survival rates of women who have had lumpectomies are still equal to those who had mastectomies.
At the present time, the results as originally reported are the same, essentially, that there still remains now, after 8 years of follow-up, no difference in the outcome of these patients.
But despite the Pittsburgh study and others like it, some physicians don't think lumpectomy is as effective as mastectomy. Dr. Jerome Urban says his experience has taught him if you don't remove all the breast, you might not get all the cancer.
The cancers that remain behind reappear a year or 2 or 3 later, and in the interim, these cancers have a tremendous opportunity to spread generally through the body and ultimately to kill the patient.
However, the vast majority of experts say one doctor's experience can be misleading. They say more reliable answers about treatment have come from several clinical studies directly comparing various treatment options. According to Boston surgical oncologist Dr. Susan Love, the conclusions from such studies are clear.
Mastectomy and lumpectomy and radiation are exactly equal treatments. They have the same rate of having it come back in the breast, and they have the same cure rate.
Since most doctors are now convinced that mastectomy and lumpectomy plus radiation offer the same chance for survival, the choice usually comes down to non-medical personal considerations. Many women are concerned most about keeping their breast and therefore choose lumpectomy plus radiation. But other women do not want to endure the follow-up radiation required after a lumpectomy. These women can be reassured that mastectomy is also a good choice.
It's true. Lumpectomy and radiation is not better than mastectomy. It doesn't cure more women than mastectomy does. It's just better in terms of quality of life.
However, deciding what is reasonable is seldom easy. In 1985, during the same week the Pittsburgh lumpectomy studies were first published, Lissa Kapust found out she had breast cancer. Even though she knew she had an alternative to mastectomy, she and her husband, Eric, were anxious.
It's easy in your mid-30s to say death is a lifetime away, but it became real, that it's a possibility. I read the study, and what it made clear to me was that the decision was not a medical one.
I remember saying to my oncologist, help me make the right decision, and he was really very helpful in his response, which was that either decision would be a right decision, and if there were a wrong decision, that he wouldn't be giving me the choice to make.
After much soul-searching, Lissa did finally choose lumpectomy and radiation. Figuring out what's right for her will start here for Patricia Crow.
You have a breast cancer on one side. You always have a chance of getting one on the other side. And both the surgeon and the radiotherapist will want to do an exam, too.
It is now just 1 week since she's been told about the cancer. This is her first meeting with oncologist Dr. Craig Henderson of Boston's Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He will coordinate her treatment plan. Patricia and her husband Robert are here to sift through the facts and discuss their feelings.
And it's also important for you to deal with it, because men also have guilt feelings during this time.
I try to be as supportive as I can, and it's her decision, as I told you, it's her body, and whatever she decides, I'll go along with.
He can't make your decision for you, but he can support that decision by saying he, agrees and feels that you've made the right decision.
We think it's very important for a woman to have either a husband or boyfriend, significant other, parents, whomever, but even 3 or 4 people present during the discussion of options.
This initial decision, which kind of surgery to have for the breast, may be the hardest to make emotionally. But the next decision to be faced after either kind of surgery may be more important in terms of long-term survival. That decision is whether to have additional treatment for any cancer that might have spread to other parts of the body. Unfortunately, in many cases, the cancer has already spread by the time the initial lump in the breast is discovered.
If you have one cancer cell in your left hip, you can have all the mastectomies in the world and it's not going to cure you. That cell's still sitting there in your left hip and it's slowly going to grow and show up again. So what you want is, in addition to what you do to the breast, is something that will circulate through the bloodstream and get down there and take care of it. And that's either chemotherapy or some form of hormonal therapy.
But since additional therapy can have multiple and serious side effects, like hair loss or bone marrow suppression, the big question is this: which breast cancer patient should have so-called adjuvant or additional therapy, which is not to be confused with the radiation to the breast following lumpectomy. Today, the best method doctors have of deciding whether cancer has spread is still to remove the armpit lymph nodes at the time of either mastectomy or lumpectomy. If cancer is found in the nodes, it is an indication that it may also be located elsewhere in the body. However, 20% of women with negative lymph nodes will still end up with some cancer that has spread. That's why some doctors use chemotherapy as a preventive measure, recommending it to patients whether or not cancer is in the nodes. Dr. Love admits many patients are getting mixed signals.
We don't have the answer, and so it's very controversial. Even in Boston, if you go to one hospital, you won't be given chemotherapy and you're node negative. You go across the street to another hospital and you'll get it. And it really varies where the oncologists sit on the fence.
I got my pajamas.
Oh, your pajamas. Where are you going to...
Lissa's doctor advised against chemotherapy because her nodes were negative and because of the possible long-term effects like leukemia or infertility.
He and I, as we talked about it, the thinking was that given my age at the time I was diagnosed, which was 34, that it becomes a different kind of decision for a younger woman because of the potential long-term effects of chemotherapy, so that with the hope that I will live a long life, the concern was that chemotherapy now might have complications 20 or 30 years from now.
With so much to consider, Patricia Crow was still reviewing all the facts 3 days before her surgery.
Probably years ago, the doctors used to say, this is what you have to do, and you do it. In a way, the options are scary because you do have to decide. Okay, it's almost like putting your life in your own hands. The thing that I personally want, I think most people want, is to be cured. Okay, that's your remaining wish. Other than that, you want to be cured in the least destructive way.
On this, the morning of her operation, Patricia has decided that the least destructive way for her is lumpectomy and radiation.
What I would do is just stay right on the outside of this incision.
I'm me, and what works for me does not necessarily work for other people. What works for other people does not necessarily work for me.
And I'd probably put one down here.
There is one thing Patricia wants other women to know.
Don't put it off and be scared that what you find, you might not like what you find. It might be cancerous. It might not be cancerous, but the best thing to do is just go and take care of it.
That is good advice. Tim, is there ever a time when a lumpectomy would not be the right operation to have?
Absolutely. For example, if the tumor is so large, it may be technically difficult. In a woman with a small breast, there's not much difference then between a mastectomy and a lumpectomy. So there are times when it can't or shouldn't be done.
What about the woman who has a mastectomy and then wants reconstructive surgery? Should she wait for a while?
It can be done either at the time of the original surgery or on a delayed basis. The important point is to talk about it if you're going to choose a mastectomy so that the operation can be planned to accommodate reconstructive surgery. It's one of the things you absolutely must talk about if you're going to choose a mastectomy today.
Well, I think what we have learned is how important early detection is, having a mammography, and also to get more than one opinion.
Very important.
Because there are choices that sometimes makes it more difficult, but there are those choices.